Hey guys, I'm Drift By, and with the beta now over, I think it's time to talk about the wound system and some concerns. The wound system is a new mechanic in Monster Hunter Wilds. If you played Rise, it's like Anomalies without the red overlay. After attacking the same area on a monster, a wound will open up, allowing for more damage to be done on this spot, and allowing for players to break these spots for even more damage. Breaking these wounds will usually put the monster in a knockdown state, and the unique thing about this is that breaking these wounds also provide power gain depending on what weapon you are using. And this is a bit of a problem because wounds are shared to everyone. If you gain significant power from popping one, but the bow user just popped all of them in one go, then you lose out on that power gain. Now this is Monster Hunter, we're here to just kill monsters and have fun. But the system is something that should be talked about for the good of Wilds. Charge Blade suffers the most from the wound system dilemma. To use Savage Axe, you need to either perfect block or break a wound. Once doing so, you can use Savage Axe, which allows for more damage and allows the axe form to stay longer than it usually would. To perfect block in solo play, it's a non-issue, but in multiplayer, it's tough. You'll want to stick close by other players to get the opportunity to block an attack. Using a luring pod also kind of helps, as well as using a bomb to time a perfect block. Otherwise, you're just stuck looking for opportunities to get a wound break. Longsword users also benefit from the wound system, as breaking a wound increases the level of their sword. Level of their sword. Spirit gauge, yeah, that. It increases their spirit gauge level when they break a wound, allowing for a faster Helmbreaker with red gauge. This one is probably mid-level on the list because longsword users are able to get there naturally with a few attacks or timing a decent counter. But it is a power gain. Faster Helmbreakers leads to more Helmbreakers during a hunt. A weapon that might sit with Charge Blade in terms of priority is Insect Glaive. It depends on how problematic the monster is when it comes to its essences. Some monsters just have hard to hit points with your bug. Something I definitely cannot relate to, especially having only played Insect Glaive a handful of times. But I hear what they're saying. Spending time trying to hit some goofy spot on a monster is time wasted and damage lost. The faster you can get to 3 essences, the faster you can get to shredding the monster. Other weapons do gain some kind of power, usually in the form of filling a meter from popping a wound, but they're not as significant as the ones mentioned here. So what's the solution? Should there be a priority list when it comes to breaking wounds? You can just look to see if you have a Charge Blade or a Longsword user in your quest, but not every player is going to know if a monster has tough to hit essence spots for Insect Glaive unless they are an Insect Glaive user themselves. There's also a chance that other players might just sleep on wound execution, and a wound could sit up for long periods of time. That's losing out on a potential knockdown while you sit and wait for those players to figure out there's a wound on the monster. That's also assuming that other players will also forfeit popping the wound for their fellow power gainers like you are.
Go ahead, Mr. Juster.
The player skill in Monster Hunter has an extreme range. Sometimes you'll party with people who seem like it's their first time playing, and then you'll have other rounds of people who seem like they could dunk on a monster with their eyes closed, which some do. There's also the possibility that some people just have different priority lists than others. And what is there to do if an Insect Glaive and a Charge Blade user fight over the wounds? There's just tons of issues when it comes down to trying to figure out the best optimal path for this kind of system, especially when there are weapons that can break multiple wounds at the same time. There's other suggestions like, what if everyone just gained the power they would if a wound is broken, regardless of who does it, which doesn't seem so bad, barring that you only have 1 or 2 weapon users who gain power from it, but a 4-man squad of longsword users all gaining a spirit gauge per wound seems like it would be too much power. 2 players just staggering their wound breaks to give the whole group instant red gauge sounds insane. The same could be said about the other weapons as well. 4 Savage Axes will shred through a monster quite quickly. That said, I should note that if 2 players hit a wound at relatively the same time, they'll both gain power from the wound. But coordinating something like that is rare and something you'll probably only see in Darkside videos or some other speedrunners. Removing this power gain seems like going backwards, because when you are able to pop a wound as a longsword, insect glaive, or charge blade user, it improves the gameplay of the weapon by a decent amount. And I just don't think the makers of the game would make wounds only visible to specific players, because it would make the multiplayer experience more mismatched and confusing. Although, I guess it's possible. Like I said previously, the player skill in Monster Hunter is a wide range. Even if some etiquette was determined by the majority of players, you're still at the mercy of other players' knowledge of the game. I'll still see hunts of players setting up bombs on a sleeping monster only for another player to just run in, guns blazing. I'm not saying that if the wound system as it was in the beta is broken or needs to be reworked. And I don't think Wilds will become unplayable or anything like that. This is more of a discussion for optimizing the wound system to its peak performance for some weapons, and if it's a cause of concern for other players. Will the makers of this game choose to decide how wounds will play out for players, or will they rely on the etiquette of its player base to govern themselves? Let me know what you think, and I'll see you later.